This video is brought to you by Raycon, who just launched an all-new product, their essential open earbuds. Enjoy crisp, clear audio from a device so light and so comfortable that you'll forget you're even wearing them. Get 20% off your order when you visit buyraycon.com/skillupopen, scan the QR code on screen, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Kronos: The New Dawn is a pivotal release in Bloober Team's history. A patchy portfolio of work prior has earned Bloober a modest fandom, but a fairly vast army of detractors, those arguing that Bloober Team's work was derivative and that it lacked a true grasp of what made the survival horror genre compelling. Then, along comes Silent Hill 2 Remake, and even the most strident of Bloober Team critics had to admit that they did pretty extraordinary work there. Inspired source material helped, absolutely, but Bloober Team's interventions in the storytelling were deft and additive. The technology that brought the storytelling to life, particularly performance capture, was industry-leading. The audio design, similarly, industry-leading. The expanded level design, new puzzles, and improved combat sandbox weren't perfect, but they were clear steps up over the original, and when combined with everything else, Silent Hill 2 Remake is the definitive way to enjoy that horror masterpiece. An incredibly tricky needle for Bloober Team to thread, given how easy it would have been to mess up something so nuanced and so beloved, but they pulled it off. Naturally then, the expectations of Bloober Team's next release are going to be substantially elevated, centered on one main question. Does Silent Hill 2 Remake mark a clear line break between the studio's patchy history and a future that sees them a preeminent survival horror developer? Or was Silent Hill 2 Remake an anomaly, and is Bloober Team still clawing their way toward that brighter future, that new dawn, you might say? The truth is somewhere in the middle, and I think where you're going to land on that question is really going to depend on how much grace you're willing to extend to Bloober Team. On the one hand, this is a really fantastic action survival horror experience, full of butt-clenching encounters and a resource economy that is among the best tuned I've ever experienced in a survival horror game. At the same time, its encounter design and resource economy can be so grueling that it's naturally going to push out a subset of players who come to these sorts of games more for horror and setting and storytelling, rather than a demanding and relentless combat puzzle. Kronos also wears its inspirations very clearly on its sleeve. It's the action survival horror of Resident Evil 4 crossed with the weighty body horror sci-fi of Dead Space, and its rendition of both of those things is excellent, but in such slavish commitment to those inspirations, Kronos can feel a little grab bag, combining a number of disparate elements that don't logically fit together while also failing to establish its own identity. This failure is manifest most notably in storytelling, always the Achilles heel of Bloober Team, and it remains as such here. Promising time-hopping quest to save humanity soon fizzles out into a confusing and incomprehensible stew of personal drama with none of the economical writing, deft performances, and technical mastery that made Silent Hill 2 Remake so compelling. It's possible to dwell on all the things that Kronos: The New Dawn gets wrong and rightly dismiss it for its derivativeness, its poor story, its overwrought performances, and its general lack of aura in a genre where aura counts for quite a lot. But there's another reading, and it's one that centers on the action survival horror gameplay, which, while demanding, is absolutely superb. And I only got more excited by combat encounters as I moved through the game's 13-hour runtime. This movement, these enemies, these weapons, this scenario design, the resource economy tuning, it's all absolutely brilliant stuff. And had Kronos managed to land that storytelling and arrive at a stronger sense of identity, this would have been a very easy, strong recommend. But even without those things, Kronos: The New Dawn still fills a desperately empty niche, that of the Dead Space spiritual successor. We will never get one from EA, sadly. We got one in the form of Callisto Protocol, and it was terrible. Bloober Team have given us one here, and while it isn't perfect, it's still very much worth experiencing if you're chasing those Dead Space highs.
About the outbreak, about the disease.
Kronos: The New Dawn has an intriguing premise. You are a lady Big Daddy with a helmet design that I strongly considered blurring out to avoid getting demonetized. You awaken in the moment when one of your compatriots falls, an automated failsafe mechanism that puts you into the field only when another fails. Your mission: first, find your fallen comrade, and second, complete his mission. Much of this is taken on faith in the opening hour or two, and indeed it takes some time for Kronos to hit its storytelling stride. Eventually though, things begin to fall into place. You are a traveler, named for your ability to travel through rifts in time. Your mission is to help avert the end of the world. A plague of mysterious origins all but wiped out humanity long ago, and your collective sends these travelers back through time to gather clues that might provide some deliverance. The clue gathering process is invasive. Rather than just question people, the traveler must extract their essence, and while it never shows exactly what this entails, it's highly unlikely that all these wiry hand things are for relaxing head massages. All of this is an extremely strong opening. The mystery of the Traveler, the mystery of the Plague, the time-traveling hook and how much it opens up the storytelling possibilities. This really could have gone places, great places in fact. Sadly, it all just spins its wheels for a good 10 or so hours before taking a very disappointing and unsatisfying left turn that doesn't deliver on any of the premise's potential. It all drifts apart slowly, bit by bit, but surely the starting point for that is the Traveler herself. She's awkwardly robotic in her line delivery, which is obviously how she's been directed, but it just doesn't quite work because the Traveler sounds like a human putting on a robotic affect rather than someone or something that is inherently robotic. I mean, just take a listen to some of the dialogue here.
Edward Vishnievsky, where is he? Is he keeping you here? The knowledge you have accumulated may be evaluated as useful. I have not suffered any serious damage. I am fit to proceed with my purpose.
That's her delivery for 13 hours straight, and while she does become more emotive in the final act of the game, it still feels awkward because efforts to humanize her don't go nearly far enough. It's a halfway point between the very human and relatable Selene from Returnal and the silent badassery of Samus from Metroid. It just doesn't quite work here. The supporting cast are no better, unfortunately. There's another Traveler you meet during your journey, but he too has this one foot in, one foot out roboticism. The human characters you meet during your time dives are not great either. They're typically very panicked when you meet them, which makes sense since they're suddenly being confronted by a heavily armored scuba diver trying to steal their brains, but even then the voice work feels overdone, and the facial capture doesn't hold a candle to what Bloober Team delivered in Silent Hill 2 Remake.
But it's dangerous outside. The disease! Everyone outside is exposed! That's why I brought her here!
Still, even with these shortcomings, I was very bought into what Bloober Team were doing here, because the idea of going back in time to piece together the mystery of a deadly plague so that you can stop it is pretty compelling. Sadly though, the game just kind of gives up on that towards the back end. I guess that's not quite accurate. It doesn't give up on it, but it essentially narrows the focus right down to something that is frankly way less interesting and very unsatisfying. No spoilers of course, but I found the final act of this game to be profoundly disappointing as it becomes this strangely intimate human story starring some decidedly inhuman characters. The pivot to a different story focus might have worked had the cast been more appropriate for the story being told, or had the characters' arcs been more believable or more felt. In absence of those things, the final act feels wasteful, squandering a strong beginning on a disappointing end. As a package, Kronos the New Dawn loses a lot of momentum owing to this weak story and cast. This is a genre that has produced some of the all-time best stories and characters and mysteries of any genre. One of the biggest reasons that people come to these sorts of games is to be immersed in a story, one that rewards all of the tension and struggle that precedes each new cutscene. Kronos is relentlessly tense, more so than most other survival horror games in fact, but the hope of rewarding story beats soon fades as the game continues to breadcrumb unsatisfying clues, and it completely vanishes in the final act when things go completely off the rails. Bloober Team had a chance to invent a new, compelling, mysterious universe here, one that might serve as the backbone for a new survival horror franchise. If Kronos does live on as a franchise, it's not going to be because of its storytelling, it's going to be because of its level design and gameplay, which are thankfully excellent.
Caution advised.
Kronos the New Dawn is set in a post-apocalyptic version of Poland. The mutation plague of long past is now referred to as the Change, and its most manifest impact is that everyone is dead, or all the humans at least. Cats still seem to exist for some reason, and one of the recurring exploration puzzles in the game is to follow the sound of a cat's meow so that you can pat them, at which point they'll give you a nice little present.
Hello, cat. Edges are calling.
Kronos is set in a number of locations which are a little tropey in the survival horror landscape, but the rendition of them here is so striking that it's difficult to be cynical about them. Bloober Team have always struggled in the narrative department, but they've always punched well above their weight when it comes to art direction and technical wizardry, and it's no different here. At times, Kronos looks incredible. Its environment's comprised of Soviet-inspired brutalism being strangled by postulating organic matter. Visuals are one of Kronos' biggest selling points, not just because, pretty graphics good, but because every environment is so detailed in its rendition that the world immerses you in ways that the story fails to do. Part of me thinks that had Kronos had no dialogue at all, it might have been a stronger game, since these worlds would inspire your imagination to author a better, more compelling story than Bloober Team were able to. In addition to wiping out humanity, the change also seemed to break apart the world structurally. The locations you'll visit, places like train stations, steel factories, hospitals, and an abbey, all sit in a suspended state of defragmentation, as though someone hit the pause button just a split second after an explosion struck. The gravity in these areas being disrupted, you're able to traverse these areas with special gravity augmenting gear, and to be honest, it looks pretty damn cool. This is explained away as something resulting from the time tears, but truthfully it sits awkwardly here, and it's a little on the nose given how much Kronos is drawing inspiration from Dead Space. That was a game set in space, so anti-gravity sections made sense. Here, they don't make sense. They feel sort of crowbarred in just to give you some Dead Space feels. I think that's further evidenced by how gimmicky this anti-grav mechanic really is. When I first encountered it, I imagined that it would open up new puzzle and exploration opportunities, where pads need to be moved and rotated to give me access to hidden areas, or where I could explore spaces in 3 dimensions by altering the gravity in the room. None of that stuff exists, sadly. These sections are really just cool looking visual set pieces. There's almost always just a single path forward. There's never any puzzle solving attached to it. It doesn't open up new exploration possibilities. It's the traversal equivalent of the COD turret set piece. It looks cool as hell, but from a gameplay perspective, it's pretty weak. Outside of this, Kronos does have a number of other environmental puzzles that are more thematically fitting, most notably one where you use your special time gun to activate nodes that will move parts of the environment. This mechanic is more interesting than the anti-grav stuff because you do have to hunt for these nodes, and you do need to activate multiple nodes at once during some puzzles. Later on, you can use these time-affected debris as a means of moving from place to place. And in combat, you can often reconstitute exploded barrels using the same mechanic, an essential crutch in some later encounters where you just wouldn't have enough ammo to get through them otherwise. And see, this mechanic really fits. A time-hopping traveler who can traverse rifts in space-time, it makes sense that you can bend time to your will to aid in exploration and combat. This is Kronos at its absolute best, finding a mechanical and thematic identity all its own. And then you get another upgrade later on, which lets you create elaborate electric circuit networks by just shooting nodes into a wall. It comes out of nowhere and it feels as awkwardly crowbarred in as the anti-grav stuff does. These Metroidvania-style upgrades and puzzles are a nice twist on the survival horror formula, and I think they result in a better game overall. Just that some of them feel out of place, and the time stuff feels like it has more potential than was utilized. All of these things work and are additive to the experience, but it's yet another example of Bloober Team defaulting to an instinct that results in derivation rather than innovation, in homage rather than identity. Where Kronos really hits its mark though is in its core level design. On top of being stunning to look at, each of these areas you're exploring are so intricately planned and filled with branching paths and secrets and shortcuts. This is one area where Silent Hill 2 Remake stumbled, as larger levels felt like big filing cabinets with an endless number of drawers that you were just pulling on. Here in Kronos, space is far more curated to feel distinct. Marquee locations sear themselves into your memory, making it easy to map the space in your mind, which is important because there's no map to rely on. Kronos will ask you to backtrack through levels, often in fact, but that backtracking is actually very rewarding since it reminds you how much you had to conquer to clear out that space, be it puzzles or enemy encounters, while also prompting you to appreciate how cleverly laid out all of this is, because the various shortcuts you unlock as you progress allow you to move through these massive dense levels with speed and ease, but only after you've earned the right to do so. Some derivative puzzle and gameplay mechanics are not enough to dull the impact of Kronos' world. It is beautiful, it is expansive, it is immersive, it is clever, it is rewarding, and it's absolutely worth experiencing. Fans of the survival horror genre might be disappointed with Kronos' storytelling, but I'm all but certain they're going to be impressed by these levels. As for the combat, well, that's going to come down to what sort of survival horror fan you are. Like, are you a Resident Evil 2 fan or a Resident Evil 4 fan? Because let me tell you, unless you answered 4, you might not be up for what Kronos is serving. First time I encountered a proper combat scenario in Kronos The New Dawn, I died like 6 times in a row, and this was against a bunch of basic bitch enemies, by the way, and it was in the first 45 minutes of the game, and I was just like, excuse me, what the hell is going on? Did I accidentally select the nightmare difficulty or some shit? Of course, there are no difficulty options in this game, except for post-game where you unlock an actual hard mode. I cannot imagine what that is like because Kronos The New Dawn is grueling enough on its default setting. I think it's really important to go into this experience with the right expectations. As we've discussed, Kronos doesn't serve up much on the story front, and level design and puzzles alone are not enough to carry a survival horror experience. Kronos is almost entirely leveraged into its action survival horror combat, and I use the word action at the front very deliberately. Survival horror combat exists on a sort of power fantasy spectrum, where classic Resident Evil games were about disempowering the player, slow movement and turn arcs, difficulty aiming, slow moving enemies who soak up bullets that are in rare supply owing to a tightly tuned resource economy. This was combat that was primarily about tension that would slowly build as enemies got closer and resources got lower. Then of course, along comes Resident Evil 4, and it's an inversion of that, a power fantasy where you can literally roundhouse kick zombies to the face. What makes Kronos such a fascinating and unique proposition in the survival horror genre is that it uses the building blocks of Resident Evil 2's slow, resource-strapped combat to arrive at a cathartic action combat experience that feels similar to the highs and the thrills of Resident Evil 4. And while it's doing all of this, it's adding in some real-time combat chess puzzle solving, and it's topping all of that off with some extremely demanding difficulty tuning that you're either going to love or hate depending on your pain threshold. The Traveler is not exactly spry. She moves slowly, she doesn't have a dodge or a 180 quick turn, she has no ability to block or parry, she's a slow-moving tank in all that armor of hers, and a fairly fragile one at that, since in the early game she can only take around 3 hits before she's down for the count. She's also got a fairly limited combat repertoire, again, especially in the early game. Her melee punch and stomp are effectively useless until an upgrade later on. The handgun reticle closes slowly while your targets demand precise aim owing to armored body parts that will deflect bullets. Most importantly, resources are incredibly scarce, and your resource carry limits are really low, and your inventory space is almost comically small with no ability to rearrange it, and with all items taking up the same amount of space. Do you want to bring a shotgun or a key? Feels like I should be able to put the shotgun in my bag and the key in my pocket. Anyway, the net effect of all of this is that you feel incredibly weak and ineffective at the start of your playthrough, and I do suspect that more than a few people will step off before getting to the other end of that power curve, because you will get there, believe me, and when you do arrive, you start to feel just as powerful and badass as Leon S. Kennedy. You get there by 2 means. The first are simple upgrades, more guns, stronger guns, more ammo capacity, more health, etc. It's a very well-paced progression curve that's always metering out improvements at a steady clip, with plenty of choice about what you want to improve, because more suit health means skipping out on precious inventory upgrades. By the end, you do feel like you have the throughput and the reserves to keep fighting for really lengthy periods, where at the start of the game, if you couldn't close out an encounter inside of 30 seconds, you were going to get tapped out. The other way you grow in power is through mastering the combat sandbox, and this is where Kronos really shines, because Bloober Team have made a bunch of small decisions that all add up to a very big impact on the combat experience. The central combat mechanic you're contending with all the time is the threat of enemies merging with the corpses of other dead enemies. When they do this, they level up and become stronger, and they can do this multiple times until the point where they're going to take a huge amount of resources to bring down. At first, this is a really onerous mechanic because you don't have the resources or game knowledge to properly deal with it, but eventually you'll learn the reach of the enemies around you so you can move about them more freely. You'll gain access to a torch upgrade that lets you burn corpses. You get more confident in your aim, and headshots will interrupt the merging process. You also get an optional melee upgrade allowing you to knock enemies away from the merge target. When all of this comes together, the merge mechanic, which once felt so oppressive, becomes fun, because it makes for a really dynamic battlefield that's forcing you to move around and adapt on the fly. Weapon swapping is another subtle but critical skill. A quick press of the D-pad will instantly switch your equipped weapon, and being able to headshot a distant foe before instantly switching to your shotgun as a bruiser enemy rushes you, that feels cool as hell every single time. What adds even more depth to the gunplay is the charge mechanic, where every weapon can be charged up for more damage or a wider bullet spread, and that charge up time is pretty slow, especially at the start of the game. That forces you to position really smartly so that you have the time to charge up each shot, and it also forces you to make every shot count, because missing a fully charged round not only feels terrible, but leaves you very exposed, often forcing you to dump some low-value uncharged rounds to make up for it. And while all of this is happening, there's also the exploding barrels to utilize, which sounds like a minor gimmick, but believe me, it is not. You do not have enough ammo to get through many of these encounters without the help of these barrels, and not all of them can be reconstituted with that time gun thing. So a big part of many encounters is clustering and herding enemies all around these explosives so you can strike at just the right moment. So by the end of the game, you don't have a roundhouse kick, you can't deflect attacks or projectiles, you're not moving any faster, and you aren't drowning in resources. But even with your slow movement and your slow charging shots and your single round weapons, you can absolutely truck a room full of these mutant things with little more than a few pistol rounds, an exploding barrel, and a whole lot of game smarts. You never feel as quick or responsive or as powerful as Leon S. Kennedy does, but you feel just as effective on the battlefield because you are fully in command of your capabilities and your environment. When you've mastered all of this, I would say the game becomes fairly easy, or at least certainly much easier than it is at the start. To those who pick this up and are feeling deterred by that initial difficulty spike, I would just say this: hold your nerve, things do get easier, and they get easier in a way that feels extremely rewarding. It isn't just about raw stats here, it's far more about mastery, and I found that so addictive and so rewarding that I'd count it among the best action survival horror combat you can experience. With core gameplay that is this good, it is a shame that Kronos is let down by some very obtuse storytelling and some uneven performances, especially when Silent Hill 2 Remake showed what Bloober Team were capable of when it came to their deft story interventions and their remarkable performance capture technology. When measured against the storytelling chops of Silent Hill 2 Remake, Kronos feels as though Bloober Team have learned little from their time spent remaking Konami's classic. Luckily though, Kronos distinguishes itself in other areas. Its visual presentation and level design are excellent, even if the puzzles underpinning that exploration are a bit of a mixed bag both mechanically and thematically. The combat that these locations play host to is the real star of the show though, and I low-key suspect that Kronos will go on to achieve a bit of a cult following owing to just how good this combat sandbox is. I do lament that Kronos doesn't seem to break the Bloober curse, the one where their narratives struggle and where their games can feel more like homage to other games rather than truly unique creations. For what it's worth, I actually do think the combat model here is unique. I think there's something going on here that hasn't quite been done before, and had it been accompanied by more aligned puzzle mechanics and a stronger story filled with compelling characters, Kronos: The New Dawn would have been an instant survival horror classic. Even without those things though, this is still a great game that I enjoyed, and I will not soon forget some of the locations I visited and the combat encounters I managed to survive by the skin of my teeth. For those reasons, I recommend it to you. A quick update on the latest product from this video sponsor, Raycon. Last month they released their all-new Essential Open Earbuds. Since then, I basically use them every single day since I'm trying to exercise a lot more, and these things are absolutely perfect for that. The Raycon Essential Open Earbuds solves so many problems created by traditional earbuds. The biggest one for me is comfort. I don't know about you guys, but always having a piece of plastic jammed into my ear can start to feel a little uncomfortable after a while. The Essential Open Earbuds sit around and on top of your ear, and no word of a lie, sometimes I forget I'm even wearing them. The best use case though is exercise. There isn't a single pair of earbuds that stay in my ear when I'm jogging, but I don't need to worry about that with the Essential Open Earbuds because their design means they stay on no matter what I'm doing. Plus, I don't get so much sweat built up in my ear, but even if I did, the Essential Open Earbuds are IPX5 certified water resistant. Also, I play a lot of tennis, and lately I've been wearing these while I play because it lets me listen to music or a podcast while I'm hitting against a ball machine. And that is so good, I love that. The sound quality is crisp and clear, allowing me to enjoy music and podcasts while also being able to hear what's going on around me, and the battery life is excellent. 8 hours of continuous playback and a total of 36 hours of charge time with the charging case. These are what I keep in my sports bag now, or what I wear when I go out for a walk or a run. They're comfortable, reliable, flexible, and the perfect way to listen to music or podcasts while leading an active lifestyle. If you're looking for earbuds that move with you, whether you're commuting, working, or just living life, the Essential Open Earbuds are the way to go. To grab a pair for yourself, just scan the QR code on screen or visit buyraycon.com/skillupopen to get 20% off your order. That QR code is right there. Otherwise, it's buyraycon.com/skillupopen for 20% off. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.